War Museum in northern Denmark says it has found a missing Nazi submarine. Researchers released these renderings of a German U-boat found on the seafloor just north of the country's coast.
The cold waters of the North Atlantic still conceal countless relics of war, but few discoveries can match the chilling atmosphere surrounding the exploration of a sunken Nazi submarine. The mission began with the silent descent of an advanced underwater drone, engineered with cutting-edge imaging technology and designed to navigate environments too dangerous for human divers. As the drone's lights pierced the blackness of the ocean depths, the shape of the submarine gradually emerged from the gloom. Corroded steel, half buried in silt, loomed into view, a grim monument to one of history's darkest chapters. For decades, this U-boat had rested in obscurity, its secrets sealed by pressure, darkness, and silence. Yet when the drone slipped inside through a ruptured hull, the past stirred, and what was uncovered sent a shiver through every observer monitoring the live feed above. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Inside the submarine, the drone's cameras revealed an environment frozen in time. Rust coated every surface, pipes hung down like skeletal ribs, and collapsed bunks whispered of men who had never returned home. The drone maneuvered cautiously through the narrow passageways, brushing aside curtains of sediment that rose and swirled like smoke in the beam of its lights. At first, the atmosphere was one of solemn curiosity, the eerie silence broken only by the hum of the drone's propellers. But the deeper it pressed into the vessel, the more unsettling the discoveries became. Strange objects, unexpected remnants of wartime experimentation began to appear in the frame, and the sinking realization dawned that this was not a simple war grave. It was something far more sinister. The torpedo room came first, its rack still holding rusted casings. Many were conventional, but among them, one stood out, a prototype weapon never documented in official naval records. Its streamlined body and unusual markings suggested a secret program, one deliberately concealed even from most of the Reich's naval command. The presence of such technology hinted at the submarine's true mission. This was not merely a patrol vessel, it had been outfitted for something extraordinary, perhaps even catastrophic. The discovery forced those watching to reconsider the scale of Nazi ambitions at sea and the lengths to which the regime had gone in pursuit of power. Moving past the weapons bay, the drone entered the control room, where the walls were still lined with gauges and shattered glass dials. Decades underwater had preserved the scene with a haunting clarity. Amid the decay, a logbook sat partially open, its pages fused by seawater yet still faintly legible. Illuminated under the drone's lights, it bore cryptic notations in precise handwriting, detailing routes, experimental operations, and references to cargo that defied normal classification. Words like special consignment and restricted repeated across the entries, each line deepening the mystery. It was clear that the submarine had carried something of immense importance, something its crew may not have fully understood. As the drone turned down another corridor, its camera caught the faint glint of glass. Beyond a bulkhead, in a compartment likely designated for storage, the drone's lights revealed rows of sealed containers. Many had burst under the pressure of decades underwater, spilling their contents into the silt. But several remained intact, their surfaces marked with faded insignia and codes. Within, the outlines of preserved specimens could be seen, some biological in nature, others mechanical, each packed with disturbing precision. This was no ordinary cargo hold. It was a repository of experiments meant to remain hidden from the outside world. The discovery raised questions not only about what these containers held, but also about the intentions behind them. The Nazi regime's obsession with creating advanced technologies, coupled with its disregard for ethical boundaries, meant the submarine may have been transporting materials tied to projects shrouded in secrecy. The engine room carried its own grim revelation. Amid the machinery lay evidence of a desperate final battle. Twisted metal, scorched surfaces, and skeletal remains still positioned as if the crew had fought to the end. The drone lingered over helmets and scraps of uniforms, a silent testimony to the lives lost in that claustrophobic tomb. Yet what unsettled observers most was the condition of certain areas, where the damage seemed inconsistent with depth charges or torpedoes. Instead, there were signs of an internal rupture, as if something within the submarine had detonated or unleashed destructive force before it ever sank. The theory arose that the crew had been transporting dangerous materials, perhaps chemical or biological in nature, that destabilized as the submarine met its fate. Whatever the truth, the result was a disaster concealed under the ocean for generations. Beyond the engine room, the drone encountered a sealed chamber, its door buckled but still partially intact. It took careful maneuvering to slip through, and what appeared inside was unlike any other section of the submarine. This room seemed insulated, lined with unusual plating, as though it had been designed to contain something volatile. Within, the drone's cameras revealed shattered glass canisters, metal restraints, and instruments that looked more suited to a laboratory than a war vessel. A dreadful possibility emerged. This U-boat had been a transport not merely for weapons, but for experiments. The Nazi regime's documented history of grotesque research lent terrifying weight to the idea. The ocean had preserved not only the submarine's structure, but also a glimpse into its forbidden mission. Observers aboard the surface ship watched in silence as the feed continued. The implications were staggering. If the Nazi submarine had indeed been ferrying experimental weapons, secret research, or biological materials, it meant that entire dimensions of wartime strategy had been buried and forgotten, erased from official histories. The discovery challenged assumptions about how close the regime may have come to unleashing horrors beyond conventional warfare. The drone's cameras became a window into a shadow war, one waged not just with steel and firepower, but with ambition to harness science in the most destructive ways imaginable. As the drone withdrew from the chamber, its lights caught one final object that deepened the unease. Resting in the corner of the compartment was a sealed steel case, sturdier than anything else inside. Its surface bore insignia still visible despite the decades underwater, markings that corresponded with the Reich's most secretive divisions. No one could determine from the video what lay within, but its presence was undeniable proof that the submarine had carried cargo of extraordinary significance. Whether it was a prototype device, sensitive documents, or something even more dangerous, the unanswered question left a chill that lingered long after the drone ascended from the wreck. The exploration of this submarine is not merely an archaeological event, it is a confrontation with history's buried truths, forcing a reevaluation of what was possible in an age when desperation and ambition drove entire nations into darkness. The chilling discoveries inside the wreck remind us that technology, when guided by cruelty and obsession, can leave behind legacies that endure even beneath the crushing weight of the sea. The terrifying aspect is not simply the objects themselves, but the realization that such things were conceived, created, and carried with the intent of changing the course of war. As the underwater drone returned to the surface, trailing the murk of centuries-old secrets, the wreck behind it remained silent once more. Yet the images it had captured could not be silenced. They stood as haunting evidence of the depths of human ambition and the shadows that still lurk beneath the waves, waiting to be uncovered. What was found inside the sunken Nazi submarine was more than relics of war. It was a reminder of how close the world had come to unleashing terrors beyond imagination. A reminder preserved not in history books, but in the steel tomb resting on the ocean floor. The drone's departure from the submarine did not mark the end of the experience. It was only the beginning of the questions. As the feed replayed on monitors aboard the research vessel, analysts and historians began poring over every frame by frame, searching for details that might explain what had been uncovered. The ocean had yielded a trove of secrets, and while the drone had only scratched the surface of the vessel's mysteries, it had opened a window into a chilling dimension of warfare that few had ever imagined. The act of sending a drone into such a vessel may appear simple on the surface, but it was a triumph of engineering. The drone had been built to withstand extreme pressure, to maintain maneuverability in tight quarters, and to relay high-definition imagery back to the surface. Its design was not accidental. It was the culmination of decades of technological progress that allowed humankind to see into places that once were the sole domain of darkness and decay. The fact that it could slide through the narrow hatches, hover without disturbing fragile relics, and illuminate hidden corners meant that every revelation carried an intimacy that felt almost like trespass. Viewers were not simply observing the wreck, they were intruding into a tomb where history had lain in silence for generations. The submarine itself seemed to resist the intrusion, Each compartment exuded an atmosphere of suffocating dread, as though the very steel walls carried the memory of what they had once contained. The claustrophobic corridors designed for efficiency rather than comfort amplified the unsettling mood. It was not just the decay that unnerved those watching, but the knowledge that men had lived, worked, and died within those confines. Every bunk frame, every discarded tool, every personal object coated in rust bore the weight of human lives reduced to whispers. And yet, the drone revealed that these were not ordinary sailors' quarters. They were spaces modified for a mission cloaked in secrecy, one whose true scope was only beginning to be glimpsed. The deeper historians delved into the implications, the more disturbing the picture became. Nazi Germany was notorious for its willingness to embrace extreme measures in pursuit of military supremacy. From advanced rocketry to unorthodox research programs, the regime blurred the boundaries between science and madness. The discovery of experimental weapon prototypes aboard the submarine fit squarely within this pattern. It suggested that the oceans themselves had been considered a testing ground, a frontier for carrying technologies that could devastate enemy shores before they even knew what struck them. The sleek prototype torpedo was not merely a relic of engineering. It was a harbinger of intentions that, if realized, could have altered the balance of power in the war. Attention turned to the storage compartments where sealed containers had lain undisturbed. In those rows of canisters, researchers recognized the shadow of projects never officially documented. The outlines glimpsed through glass and metal hinted at substances and specimens not meant for ordinary warfare. This carried terrifying implications. The submarine might have been a vessel of transport for biological or chemical agents. The Nazis had already shown willingness to explore such avenues, but the notion of placing them aboard a submarine, capable of traveling unseen across oceans, added a chilling dimension. It meant that entire cities or harbors could have been targeted not with bombs, but with unseen plagues unleashed under cover of night. One detail that stood out to observers was the unusual insulation of one chamber, a feature that seemed out of place in a military submarine. Its reinforced design suggested that it was meant to contain volatile materials, whether chemical, biological, or something altogether different. The presence of shattered glass canisters in that room carried dreadful symbolism. If the submarine had sunk with its deadly cargo intact, then the sea itself had swallowed what might have been unleashed upon populations above. Yet this was not a comforting thought. It was a sobering reminder that some of the most destructive ambitions of war remain sealed only by accident, resting in the fragile balance of salt water and corrosion. The skeletal remains of crew members added an even darker layer to the revelations. To see helmets, bones, and uniforms scattered among machinery was haunting enough. But what disturbed many was the positioning of certain remains, as though the men had died while fighting something inside rather than an attack from without. It sparked speculation that the crew may have fallen victim to the very materials they were transporting. Perhaps an accident had ruptured one of the canisters. Perhaps the prototype weapon had malfunctioned. The wreck did not speak clearly, but the silence itself suggested that these men had perished in a struggle not simply against Allied forces, but against their own cargo. The case found in the final chamber became an object of fascination. Its durability after so many decades, its markings that tied it to the most secretive branches of the Reich, and its very existence aboard a submarine that was never supposed to reveal its mission. All of these pointed to a hidden chapter of wartime operations. Scholars debated what it could contain. Sensitive documents? A compact prototype weapon? Artifacts stolen during the regime's campaigns across Europe? Or was it something even more sinister, preserved deliberately in a container designed to resist the crushing depths? The case became less an object and more a symbol of unanswered questions, a vessel of possibility that carried with it the weight of the unknown. The implications of the drone's discoveries ripple outward beyond the submarine itself. They force a reconsideration of how history remembers technological ambition during the war. Much of what we know about the period comes from documents and testimony, but the submarine represents evidence unfiltered by victors' narratives or sanitized reports. It is raw, unmediated, and brutally honest in its suggestion that there were projects designed never to see the light of day. The drone did not simply explore a wreck. It pulled back a curtain on the ambitions of a regime that sought power through every conceivable means, regardless of morality or consequence. The reaction of those who viewed the footage was visceral. Some spoke of a creeping dread that lingered long after they looked away. Others described it as if the wreck itself radiated menace, as though the objects inside carried not just historical weight but a kind of spiritual residue. Such impressions may seem fanciful, yet they underscore the emotional gravity of encountering tangible remains of evil. The submarine was not a museum display curated for reflection. It was an untouched scene, a sealed chamber of history suddenly revealed. The rawness of that exposure gave it a power that textbooks could never replicate. The broader implications extend to questions of secrecy and forgotten technology. How many other vessels lie hidden, their missions unknown, their cargoes undisturbed? The oceans cover vast expanses, and beneath them may rest more than just relics of conventional warfare. Each discovery, like this submarine, challenges the assumption that we have accounted for all the dangers of the past. The ocean is not simply a graveyard, it is a vault, one whose contents remain locked away until technology gives us the key. The terrifying element is that we do not know what else waits in the darkness, preserved and patient. The drone's journey also raises philosophical questions about the pursuit of knowledge. Was it wise to enter the submarine at all? To awaken secrets that had slept undisturbed for generations? There is a haunting irony in the fact that humankind, driven by curiosity, often uncovers truths that carry as much terror as enlightenment. The drone revealed more than history. It revealed the shadows of ambition, the remnants of dreams that, if realized, could have brought devastation unimaginable. In shining light into the submarine, it illuminated not only the wreck, but also the darker corners of human ambition. What strikes most deeply is the silence of the submarine. Unlike battlefields or ruins above ground, there were no sounds of war, no echoes of conflict, only the quiet testimony of objects preserved by the sea. That silence amplifies the horror, for it suggests that the most terrifying discoveries do not roar into existence but lurk quietly, waiting. The submarine embodies this truth, that evil often hides not in spectacle but in secrecy, in missions intended never to be known, in cargoes carried beneath the surface until fate intervenes. For those who studied the footage in depth, the psychological weight was immense. To look at the sealed case, the shattered canisters, the prototype torpedo, was to confront a reality in which entire nations had been one misstep away from catastrophe. The submarine did not simply carry weapons, it carried the possibility of altering history's trajectory. To acknowledge that possibility is to recognize how fragile the boundary between survival and annihilation can be. The drone's discoveries serve as a chilling reminder of how close the world has always hovered to the edge, often without even realizing it. The ocean has a way of preserving not only physical objects, but also the emotions tied to them. In exploring the submarine, the drone became a mediator between the past and the present, carrying images that bypassed rational analysis and struck directly at the imagination. The viewers were not just seeing rust and steel, they were seeing the embodiment of ambition, secrecy, and death. It was history stripped of its distance, pressing close with a weight that could not be ignored. And yet, there is something fitting about the submarine's resting place. The sea swallowed it, silenced it, and kept its secrets until the moment technology made revelation possible. In that balance lies a strange justice. The ambitions of destruction drowned before they could be realized. Still, the terror comes from knowing how close they came to the surface, how narrow the margin was between what happened and what might have happened. The drone's exploration does not only uncover history, it confronts us with the abyss that history almost became. What was found inside the submarine is terrifying not only because of the objects themselves, but because of what they represent. They are fragments of a worldview that saw no limit to what could be weaponized, no boundary too sacred to cross in pursuit of victory. The submarine, in its decay, is a mausoleum for that worldview, a reminder of how far humanity can descend when driven by ambition untethered from conscience. Each discovery inside is not simply an artifact, it is a warning. As the wreck once again settled into silence, the world above grappled with what had been seen. The drone had returned, the images stored, the data preserved. But the questions lingered, unanswered, heavy as the ocean pressing down upon the hull. Perhaps that is the final terror of the discovery, not what is known, but what remains unknown. The submarine is no longer just a relic, it is a riddle, and in its dark steel chambers lies the reminder that the past still has the power to frighten, to unsettle, and to warn. The discovery of the submarine's hidden interior had already shaken those who witnessed it. Yet the story did not end with the simple cataloging of objects. The true weight of the event lies in how it reframes our understanding of the Second World War, and the strange pathways history might have taken had this vessel reached its destination. To comprehend the full scale of the terror, one must not only picture what was found within those steel walls, but also imagine the wider context in which such a mission would have operated. The submarine's silent testimony suggests layers of ambition and desperation, each one revealing how close the conflict came to an entirely different outcome. The role of submarines during the war was already central to naval strategy. These vessels were hunters of convoys, shadowy predators that slipped beneath the waves to strike suddenly and vanish into darkness. But this submarine was not outfitted solely for such a role. Its corridors, modified to hold strange containers and experimental weapons, signaled that its purpose had diverged from ordinary combat. It had become a courier of secrets, a mobile laboratory, and perhaps even a doomsday machine disguised as a patrol craft. To reimagine the Atlantic theater with such vessels in operation is to picture a war far darker than the one that unfolded. Entire supply lines could have been poisoned, ports rendered uninhabitable, or terror spread through invisible means that made defense impossible. The very presence of the reinforced chamber inside the submarine raises troubling questions about how far Nazi Germany had advanced in its experimentation with unconventional warfare. A sealed environment within a submarine suggests knowledge of containment, of transporting substances or devices that could not be exposed to open air or seawater. The architecture of that chamber speaks to foresight, planning, and engineering dedicated to a task outside the scope of conventional weaponry. It was not simply a cargo hold, it was a vault, deliberately designed to safeguard whatever was deemed too dangerous to be left vulnerable. The implications of this extend into the philosophy of war itself. Traditional combat relies upon predictable methods, firepower, movement, strategy. But what the drone uncovered hints at an approach that bypassed those conventions entirely. It suggests a strategy of terror, of psychological domination through the threat of the unknown. To face an enemy who wields guns and planes is one thing. To face an enemy who unleashes invisible weapons of disease, toxins, or experimental technology is another. The submarine's mission, frozen in time, exposes the fragility of the rules that societies cling to even in times of war. Another detail worthy of reflection lies in the handwritten notes of the submarine's logbook. Though time and seawater had rendered many entries illegible, the surviving phrases point toward shipments marked as restricted and consignments described with unusual caution. The meticulousness of the handwriting suggests not haste, but procedure, a careful documentation of something understood to be both valuable and dangerous. This raises an unnerving thought, that those aboard may not have been ignorant couriers, but aware participants, instructed in protocols designed to keep their cargo stable. If this was the case, then the submarine was not merely a warship, but an active extension of experimental programs hidden far from ordinary scrutiny. The containers themselves invite further speculation. Though some were broken and their contents lost to the ocean, others remain sealed, their integrity preserved against crushing pressure. The silhouettes glimpsed inside appear too varied to represent simple weapon components. Some resembled biological specimens, preserved for transport or study, while others bore the outlines of mechanical constructs, as though the submarine carried prototypes or parts of technologies not yet ready for mass deployment. The diversity of what was stored suggests that this mission was multifaceted, combining research, weaponry, and perhaps even looted scientific materials taken from occupied territories. In this interpretation, the submarine was not only delivering tools of war but also carrying the building blocks for further experimentation once it arrived. Consider, too, the symbolic power of the sealed steel case found within the insulated chamber. Its very design seems calculated to survive circumstances that would obliterate everything else around it. By enduring decades under saltwater, it has proven the durability of its construction and the determination of its creators to protect whatever lay inside. Such an object is not casual. It is deliberate. Its markings, tied to secretive divisions of the Reich, evoke images of programs that operated outside the awareness of even the broader military. This reinforces the impression that the submarine was entrusted with cargo considered too sensitive for ordinary channels. cargo meant for only the highest circles of command. The discovery has consequences for how we perceive the hidden dimensions of war. We often imagine history in terms of what happened, but finds like this remind us that history is also shaped by what almost happened, what was planned in shadows but never reached the light of execution. The submarine is a time capsule of these unrealized possibilities. It whispers of weapons that were conceived but not deployed, of missions that might have altered the tide of conflict had they succeeded. In this sense, its cargo is terrifying not because it was used, but because it was intended. The intent alone reveals the extremity of ambition and cruelty that defined the regime's mindset. There is also the human element to consider. The remains of the crew, scattered among machinery and collapsed passageways, speak to lives entangled in these hidden missions. Were they volunteers or conscripts? Did they understand the full scope of what they carried, or were they pawns in a game orchestrated above them? The submarine offers no answers, only silent testimony in the form of skeletal fragments and rusted uniforms. Yet their presence transforms the vessel from an artifact into a tomb, a place where human suffering intersects with technological ambition. The terror lies not only in the objects discovered, but also in the realization that human beings lived and died in service of such missions. The psychological impact of exploring such a wreck cannot be understated. Those who monitored the drone's journey described the atmosphere as oppressive, as though the submarine itself exhaled a weight of dread. Every corridor seemed to draw the viewer deeper into a confrontation with human capacity for destruction. The sight of shattered glass canisters evoked not only scientific experimentation, but also images of laboratories where ethics had no place, where human lives may have been reduced to variables in calculations. The discovery forces us to acknowledge that beneath the surface of documented history, entire worlds of cruelty and ambition may remain hidden. Beyond the immediate revelations, the submarine also challenges our understanding of technological development. The prototype torpedo and other advanced weaponry hint at a level of progress that may have been underestimated in historical accounts. If these devices had been perfected, the naval war could have shifted dramatically. Submarines carrying such armaments might have penetrated defenses with terrifying efficiency, striking with weapons against which there was no preparation. The wreck demonstrates that the margin between conventional conflict and radical escalation was thinner than previously imagined. The ocean itself becomes a character in this narrative, both destroyer and preserver. It claimed the submarine, preventing its mission from being realized, yet it also safeguarded its secrets, sealing them in silt and pressure until technology advanced enough to uncover them. There is a haunting irony in this dual role. The sea both halted a terrifying potential and preserved it for future generations to confront. The drone's exploration revealed not only history's fragility, but also nature's role as custodian of truths too dark to emerge until the world was ready or unready to face them. The broader implications extend into geopolitics. The discovery suggests that nations must reconsider what relics of past conflicts still lie undiscovered, waiting in the deep. If one submarine can yield such disturbing evidence, how many others rest in silence with secrets equally potent? The oceans are vast, and wartime records are incomplete. The wreck is a reminder that history is never fully written, that it lurks beneath the waves in the form of steel coffins carrying evidence of ambitions never realized. This has a chilling effect on how we think about the present, for it shows that what is hidden can emerge at any time, challenging the narratives we thought were complete. Most unsettling of all is the reminder that the pursuit of knowledge and technology is not inherently moral. The submarine is a monument to the ways in which human ingenuity can be bent toward destruction. The reinforced chambers, the experimental weapons, the sealed case, all are products of creativity, engineering, and intellect. Yet in their context, they embody terror because their purpose was not to heal or build, but to annihilate. This duality forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that progress and horror often grow from the same soil, and it is only intention that divides them. As the submarine rests once more in silence, its secrets partly revealed, it remains a haunting reminder of paths not taken. It embodies the terror of potential, the weight of intentions buried but not forgotten. The underwater drone may have illuminated its corridors, but what it truly revealed was not confined to steel and rust. It was the enduring shadow of ambition, without restraint. A shadow that continues to unsettle even in the present. The drone's journey into that submarine teaches that the past is not finished with us. It waits in silence, preserved in rusting chambers and sealed containers, ready to remind us that history's darkness is never as far away as we wish to believe. What was found inside is terrifying, not because it acted upon the world, but because it could have, and in that unrealized potential lies the deepest horror of all. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on exploring sunken Nazi submarines with underwater drones today? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.